Okay, so grade 3 is quite a big step up from grade 2. We have to play full bar chords, we have to play quite quickly, we have to play hammer-on and pull-off slurs, quarter note bends, slides, and of course solos. So make sure that when you're starting to think about doing grade 3 that you've got a reasonable handle on all of those different things. We've also got to play obviously the scales and arpeggios at the back of the book, and I'd like to make one big suggestion about those. People very often work on the pieces and choose which ones they want to do and everything, which is obviously the right thing to do, and they kind of leave the scales and arpeggios to the last minute. The problem with that is that the scales and arpeggios, and indeed the other chord exercises and so on, are actually there partly to help you develop your playing technique to play the pieces. So it would be a better bet to do the scales and other exercises at the back of the book first, before you play the pieces, or at the very least as you're starting to learn them, so that you're building the strength and coordination and general understanding and knowledge as you go along playing the pieces, rather than tacking those elements on at the end, or rather trying to. So there's the first little thought. I would also suggest that for grade 3 it's not going to be particularly expected that you have access to lots of different pedals or other tone shaping devices. If you do have them though, it would be a really good idea to start to employ them, because the mixture of different styles and the extra colour and variety that it'll give to your performance would definitely be a plus. But make sure firstly that any pedals and so on that you bring into the exam you can basically set up and go straight away. You don't want to be sitting around fiddling with them for 10 minutes trying to make them work. Equally, make sure that you really understand them and that they're going to do what you need, rather than, shall we say, end up causing lots of problems, for example having too much gain or not enough gain, or who knows what. So seriously consider using some effects if you've got them, but only if you really know that you're going to be able to use them really properly. With the scales and arpeggios, they're going to suggest, with the scales, arpeggios and exercises, the examiner will ask whether you want to play them along with the metronome or be given a single bar to give you the tempo. I always suggest aim, if at all possible, to play along with the metronome. Basically, you're more likely to stay at the right tempo, and if you can do it, then it shows that you've really learnt your scales and so on. Frankly, if you can play along with the 3 tracks that you're going to be playing for the main part of the exam, it should be a doddle to play a scale with a metronome. But because it's a more kind of simple, abstract sort of exercise, that it can leave you feeling more exposed. But basically, I would definitely play with the metronome if you can. Now, if you possess a metronome and it's a traditional type, you've probably noticed already that it doesn't have a marking of 90 beats a minute. Traditional ones have 88 or 92. That was helpful, wasn't it? So I'm going to play the scales at 92. I would also suggest in your own practicing of them, not only that you play them slower than 90 or 92 or whatever, building up towards it, but also go beyond. It's a very good idea with anything to make sure that you can play faster and slower than whatever the tempo is that you're going to actually play. One of the reasons for that is that when you're practicing at home, obviously you're relaxed, or at least you're trying to play as relaxed as you can. When you get into the exam room, you're going to be feeling possibly slightly less relaxed, and so your perception of speed, tempo, what it feels like will be different, and so your hands will probably feel or experience, as it were, the tempo they're being asked to play differently. So if you've only ever, or for weeks before the exam, played your scales and so on at the same tempo, it'll feel a bit weird, potentially. If you go in there having regularly practiced a whole range of different speeds, then it won't feel as weird because your hands will be used to the sensation of playing differently. So here's the scales. I'm going to zoom in so you can see the fingering. So here's a G major scale played at 92 beats a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4. Also the recommendation, very strong recommendation, to play all of these things with a clean tone, and preferably the neck pickup on your guitar. Here's the A natural minor scale. Look out for the fingering for the little change of position in the middle. 3, 4. Of course, these are my recommended fingerings, they're not required, but if you do them then I'm sure you'll get on fine. Here is the B pentatonic minor. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pointing out with that one that we don't get to play the top note in this B minor sense. It would be the 10th fret. You very often see a pentatonic minor scale with this extra note in there. Basically that's not a scale, that's the notes in that position. So when you're playing them for the exam, you're just doing the 2 octaves from the 7 to the 7. Don't add any extras in. Here's the A major pentatonic. 3, 4. And the G minor blues scale. Okay, they call it G blues scale, it's a minor one. 3, 4. Did a bit of a curl at the end, that penultimate note there. Basically, I would suggest you play them pretty kind of dryly and academically. Don't play them with palm muting or with lots of rock and roll attitude. Here's the arpeggios. Before I play them, you've got to decide how you're going to finger the top 2 notes of these arpeggios because they're on the same fret. The kind of posh technical way to do them would be with 2 different fingers like that. Or, the rock and roll way would probably be, or. It's up to you. Personally, I'm going to do them with 2 different fingers. I think it gives you more control, but there is of course a lot to be said for using that flattening finger roll to get the 2 notes, the point being that you can roll without sounding both of the notes at the same time. Two, 3, 4. There's the G major, and then we do B minor. 3, 4. Group C chords. Remember, for the C and D chords to decide whether you're going to mute with your third or your fourth fingers, and also decide if you're going to mute the first string to avoid the possibility of that note ending up in the chord, because that would be wrong. Also make sure that you strum it reasonably promptly. It's not meant to be that, it's meant to be. And make sure you actually get all the notes that are required, including the top string, because obviously that's a pretty easy one for the examiner to hear. Here we go, 2, 3, 4. And then with the dominant seventh chords, I have a feeling with this bit they don't use the metronome. I think they ask you to strum the chord and then pick it. So here's A seventh, and then picked individually. Looking out for the third string open and the first string open, making sure they're not being muted by the fingers next door. C seventh. Particularly looking out for the first string open, making sure it's not muted by the back of the first finger. Again, the top string of the chord is always really easy to hear if it's missing. D7. Probably the only danger with this one is the thing of starting on the fifth string by accident. It really is meant to start on the fourth string. And the E7. I did the chords and the arpeggios and the scales with a clean tone, basically to avoid the possibility of accidents. For the riff, group D, clearly this is a very rock and roll style thing. If you really know you've got the presence of mind to change your tone and then potentially change it back, then give yourself a bit more of a rock and roll overdriven sound for this. In the riff, they do the thing of printing the first two bars and then they expect you to work out what to play for the rest of it. I'm going to show you the fingering. But basically what they're trying to get us to understand is how shapes, chords or riff shapes can be moved across the strings, and that produces the same relationship between the notes. This doesn't apply once you get onto the second string, but we're not going there. So here's how it looks close up. So the written part is this. And then we start with our first finger on the fifth string 5 as we do the section marked D minor. We do 2 of those. Fourth string 7 to 6, and then 5, and then the fifth string on the 8th, and then we go to the third string 7 to 5, then the fourth string 7 to 5, and the fifth string 8 to 5. And here's how it looks when you play the entire thing. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So there it all is. I had a lot of fun working on these grade 3 tracks. You find at this stage you're playing things that really sound and feel like they're part of the sort of real world of guitar playing. So remember to take this stuff really seriously. By the time you're getting to this grade 3, it's not impossible to fail. So you do have to put in enough work to actually make sure you can do all of the different elements, including all of those things which are possibly slightly less exciting, dare we say, such as scales and arpeggios and so on, as well as the listening back, the playing back stuff and the theory questions at the end. So look out for my other videos and my other help stuff, and I hope to see you around. Bye.